Michael Penix is the biggest. What if he's good in the NFL? But I think he's got some dog in him, and I believe he will be very good this year, and I'll tell you why.
The barbershop is open, and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's good in the hood from the barbershop here on Locked On NFL? I am Tony Wiggins, your host of the Locked On NFL Barbershop Show here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and we appreciate you making us your first team every day. We thank you for making us your first listener. Shout out to the everydayers and to the newcomers. If you're new here, welcome. I'll give you a reason to stay. If you're not new here, you already know it's Thursday, so that means I'm joined by my man Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers. We're going to get to this show right in just a few minutes. Here's what we're going to discuss today, man. We got to talk about Michael Penix. That's what we're going to talk about at the top of the show. I'm going to tell you where we're going first. The Ravens are a sleeping giant. Y'all probably think I'm crazy, but you got to hear me out. We'll get to it in segment 3. The Dolphins, they're going to either change or be changed. They're going to get swapped out if they don't swap the way that they have finished in the standings. We'll discuss them. But first and foremost, starting down in the A, my man Michael Penix. I ain't messing around. You're going FAFO, and that means mess around and find out fighting a dude with a do-rag on. I ain't never seen this dude without that do-rag, man, but I know what a do-rag and black Air Forces mean, Chris. That means they about that business.
Certainly isn't someone you want to run into on a bad day. But no, Michael Penix, I think, is going to be really interesting this year. You know, he had a lot. The thing is, if I'm the coaches, I'm like, hey, Michael, you have an injury history. I don't need you fighting out there and accidentally spraining your hand or some mess. So I always think it's interesting, but like toughness is something that does get people charged up about their quarterback, and that's something that you want. You want to have the charisma as a quarterback. That's very much necessary because you want your guys protecting for you, fighting for you. You know, Jalen Ramsey was just on the Pivot podcast this week talking about how the way Aaron Rodgers operates, you don't want to let him down, and that spirit emanates throughout the team. And so when you have toughness, when you have that fire in you, teammates do sometimes get behind that. So I think that's a plus from Penix. He just better not get injured doing it.
Right. And that is called reverence, the fear. My grandmother was 4'10", and she scared me to death, not because I thought she could physically whoop me, but because I did not want to disappoint her. So I can definitely understand that. And those players, you know what they probably said and what the coach probably said? All right, Mike, we see you, but we don't want to see you do that no more. Check this out here from Locked On Falcons.
As you mentioned, sidelines are clearing, benches are clearing, and everybody's coming to the middle. And next thing I see is Mike Penix on the ground. And so, of course, your teammates, when you see your prized possession, and in the NFL, it is a lot of money on the line when you got a starting quarterback on the ground. That's scary. And the whole point of these joint practices, especially for Mike, who doesn't play in preseason games, these quarterbacks aren't live, so they can't get hit. DJ Williams, the quarterback's coach for the Falcons, even said that's his first hit in training camp on Mike Penix Jr. Look, and he's a competitor. You know, the guy played running back when he was in Little League. He likes to put his nose in there, but unfortunately in the NFL, you got to protect your assets at all costs. So I know that made probably coaches, and Terry Fontenot was even in there. And that's when, you know, things are getting a little rough whenever you see your general manager running to the middle of the field and trying to break something like that up. So it was a rare occurrence. I don't know that I'll ever see anything like it again. And he even told me when I asked him, have you ever been a part of something like this before? Mike, you're so calm. You're never really one to instigate. You don't really seem like the trash talker that, say, a Drake London would be, who you could not contain after this happened, by the way. He was just chirp, 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 chirping the whole.
Yeah, you see the teammates responding to it, and that's the response. And shout out to Aaron Freeman and his guests, but that's the response that I anticipate people will have. Like, we appreciate it, but you don't want him doing that. But what it did do, it ignited the rest of his teammates, and they will also defend him to the death now. And I hate to bring this up because he ain't got nothing to do with this, but it's the total opposite of Anthony Richardson walking out and subbing himself out in the game, and then teammates looking around saying, I ain't never seen nothing like that before. Now they're saying, I ain't never seen nothing like that before, because the dude is actually standing up for himself and willing to swing on people. I do know this, though. Whether or not the Falcons are good this year won't depend on whether he can fight, whether his hands are up to date.
I was going to go next, man.
It will depend on his ability to play. But those little intangibles will help those guys. At least they will never question his toughness. And if they have a question about anything, it might just be something else, but at least it won't be that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to go next. Is that like, look, this is a cool story for training camp. He's not hurt. People can get like, wow, didn't know he had that in him. But it won't matter if he comes out and he throws 3 interceptions in the first game, or he just has an average day. He needs to come out and be the guy that the reason that they invested in the first round for. He needs to come out and play well, be a leader on the field. When you do that, then it's like, then you also have those stories in the background, like, Michael Penix will fight you if you ain't careful. It's a cool thing to have in the background, but you gotta have more. And Michael Penix might have more. I loved watching him in college. I thought he was fantastic. My biggest question for him in the NFL was, would his size hold him back, and would his injury history hold him back? And so far, I guess we'll just find out. But I certainly like him. I hope he does well. But certainly, like you said, he's got to prove it. Before we start like talking about, oh, is he this and he that.
Man, speaking of prove it, Shedeur Sanders, he had. I'm not going to say everybody who's been against him totally changed, but he kind of made everything quiet down a little bit. He made the other side, the people that's been trying to tell people he's great the whole time. Oh, they came out of the woodwork, man. They were climbing out of sewers, jumping all over people saying, I told you so. He was supposed to start again, but it looks like he won't because he got banged up. Listen to Spencer Jeremy from Locked On Browns.
Day one of the Browns joint practice with the Philadelphia Eagles was certainly eventful, starting at the quarterback position, of course, where we got to the end of practice and Shedeur Sanders hadn't taken a single rep during team drills, 11-on-11s, 7-on-7s. Seemed a little fishy once we saw Tyler Huntley taking reps in 7-on-7s and even a small portion of 11-on-11s early in practice. And we found out afterwards that he was dealing with an oblique injury that kept him out of practice. He suffered it early on in practice. He did take reps in one-on-ones, and that's where he apparently sustained the injury. And it was a weird setup to get to the point where we learned after practice that he was dealing with this injury. And so that set the stage for Joe Flacco and Dylan Gabriel to really handle the bulk of practice. Kenny Pickett still limited, only doing 7-on-7s. And so it was Gabriel and Flacco mixing and matching a little bit. Gabriel got a handful of snaps with the 1s, but largely was with the 2s and the 3s. Flacco took the majority of those first team reps. Gabriel actually, I thought, had a pretty solid day, all things considered. Threw 2 touchdown passes, only quarterback who threw any touchdown passes during team drills today.
All right, so here's the story. The story is people saying they setting him up for failure, but then not giving the Browns credit when he had success. If they were setting him up for failure and he was succeeding, boy, he is the greatest player ever, in my opinion, if he was set up by his own team to succeed or to fail and then he succeeded. But this is a little minor setback for him. Are you fatigued with this story yet, Chris?
It's not a fatigue thing yet. Listen, I get the excitement around Shedeur Sanders. He was a fun college quarterback to watch. I rooted for him as an HBCU grad. Anytime I see a guy that starts at an HBCU and then develops into the D1, I'm pulling for that guy, and I want to succeed. But I was also one of those people that said like the Steelers needed a quarterback. I was like, the Steelers should not pick him in the first round. I don't think he's a first round quarterback. And people are like, oh, you hate him? I'm like, no, I don't think he's like that. And look, I was watching that preseason opener. Looked good. I liked the way he moved the ball, but when you're in the preseason, no defense is running to try to stop you. They're running basic plays. They're all they're trying to do is make sure that their young guys are being able to do the basics things. So the fact that he was able to hit some of those throws, that's a positive. That's sure it's better than him not hitting those throws. But we got to see how he plays. Like, the time that I referenced for, if you're a Locked On Steelers fan, you know where I'm going to with this. But 2 years ago, when Kenny Pickett was going through the preseason, every drive in the preseason that he was on the field, the Steelers scored a touchdown. They would run the ball, they would pass the ball. George Pickens was on fire, and everyone was like, "Whoa, this is going to be great! This is a Super Bowl. Here we come!" And then the first week, they get slaughtered by the Niners by like 30 points. And then Kenny Pickett's just not good that year. And so preseason, it's a good thing to check boxes. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that he showed positives, but let's not overhype it the way that everyone overhypes everything. Let's keep seeing him check boxes. Let's see how he recovers from this injury, and then we'll see how things look in the rest of the preseason.
No doubt about it. That's what the preseason for. Don't go be looking at Jackson Dart's stats because that might kill your narrative. Also, don't look and see what Gardner Minshew did last week. He did the same thing he's done in every preseason. Looked like a Hall of Famer. So we got to temper all of that stuff. The Dolphins need some good mojo. The Dolphins got torched yesterday in their one-on-one practices with Detroit, and it's just like, oh my God, here we go. Yeah, here we go. You're right. You got bad news coming. I'm gonna tell you right now in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and my boys at Showtime and Playmakers, we're using Yahoo Fantasy for the 18th consecutive year. You ought to get in on it too, man. If it's your millionth time playing fantasy football and you haven't used Yahoo, then you ain't done it right. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/locked-on. Keeping it moving here on Locked On NFL, the barbershop with Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We are now going to discuss the Miami Dolphins. And I know Dolphins fans think I don't have good things to say about them all the time. But look, the bottom line is things have to change in Miami or there will be change. That is the way things go in the National Football League. What things? Well, nobody better to tell you than Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins.
This is a pivotal moment for the people running this organization because this is the start of the regression or the compression or the hedging or whatever you want to call it. You have to show you can take that reset and accelerate and create development with players and identify new talent and have a cohesive vision and try to retain your people. And that's why for me, this season's measures of successes, to bring this conversation full circle, are about the process of it all. That's what I am going to define this season by, one way, shape, or form.
Yep, sounds like to me that means pink slips is coming if they don't change, and I don't think they've done enough to change for that team. My man Matt Williamson always says, too many Ferraris, not enough dump trucks. I'm going to use another example. Best dressed person in the club every night, and they always leave by themselves. They're pretty, but they don't get results. Chris, what's going on with Miami, man?
I mean, they haven't found their continuity, right? Like Michael McDaniel came there. He was supposed to be the offensive guru that was going to change everything, make everything simpler. But, can't protect Tua Tagovailoa. Defense is here and there. And they tried to add stars like Jalen Ramsey. Didn't work. I give it time. They're in a tough division with the Bills at the top, and but if you're gonna be one of those guys, you got to beat the top dogs. You got to be able to beat the Bills, and you got to be able to contend with them in the long run. And unfortunately, also for Miami, they do not do well when it gets colder. And I think that there's some struggles there that they got to work through right now. But when I look at the Dolphins right now, I think that they have so long to they don't have long to get things done right now, because like Kyle's saying, like if things don't start to work, they're gonna start making questions. They're gonna say, okay, where do we have to make our investments? Because Tyreek Hill already said he wanted gone, and he's still there. Tua Tagovailoa is talking about how he's got some things to answer to. You got questions about Jalen Waddle. Your offensive line really hasn't taken shape just yet. You're hoping that guys like Chop Robinson and Bradley Chubb can become a really good pass rushing pair, but and then you brought in Minkah Fitzpatrick. You're hoping he can like form up your secondary, but it's a lot of duct tape situations where I'm not so sure that they've got the keys to be able to do what they need to do to win that division or even make the playoffs at this point. When you look at what they've done, they were 8-9 last year, and when Mike McDaniel took over, they were 9-8. They went to 11-6 the year after that. But now here they are back to 8-9. And there's their star receivers, being questioned by the quarterback, and he's saying he wants to go. It's not a good look. It's not something that you want to have on your side, and you need some unit to emerge and become strong. You need those investments in the offensive line, like Patrick Paul. I think he was a rookie last year, maybe a second-round pick. James Daniels, a guard that they just signed over from the Steelers, who was good for the Steelers. Austin Jackson, who they drafted years ago, and it really kind of just hasn't developed into like a star yet. But they need that group, somebody to turn into one of the better units in the NFL at some point, develop some synergy, because if they don't get a group that does that, they're probably going to be hovering right where they are right now, and that's going to lead to them basically saying, hey, we gotta break this up and try again.
Yep. You know what? You can't pretend. You can't pretend to be strong. You're either strong. You can look strong and not be strong, right? I think the Miami Dolphins this year are trying to puff their team up in the gym, and it don't mean a thing, because they're going to look like bodybuilders, but they ain't going to look like powerlifters. Football is all about contact and power, and you have to be physical. You have to have it as a mentality. I don't think you can do it in one off season. It just has to be in your DNA of who you are, which leads me to another team in that division, the Jets. Aaron Glenn is all about toughness. For 2 years in a row, they have now drafted offensive tackles in the top 12 of the draft. And it looks like they hit last year, and according to some people, they've hit this year. It's going to lead to somebody getting paid, since their quarterback isn't the greatest passer. First, we're going to listen to John Butchko, and then I'll tell you who.
And I think that the most promising performance was by Armand Membou, who blocked 10 times on passing plays, allowed 0 pressures. Now, that does not mean Armand Membou is automatically heading to the Hall of Fame. But what it does show us is the first sign that Membou is ready to start. I like to look at the preseason as kind of like a long story. That was chapter 1. And I will tell you that in the past, I've watched rookie offensive linemen, and sometimes you could tell within a few snaps that they're just not ready to play. That was not the impression you got with Membou. Membou looked like he was ready to go.
Yep. And Chris, as a team, you cover a team that has invested a lot in their offensive line, and they do that because they make no bones about it. Y'all in the Chargers, you make no bones about it. Look, we're going to play physical, and we're going to run the football. Breece Hall, I'm on the market right now. He's going to be the next running back to get paid. James Cook got paid. I think Breece Hall is next, and I think it's going to be because of the way that team is set up and Aaron Glenn's mentality. They're going to run the football, and he is going to benefit.
I like to believe that the Jets' run game is going to take play, but what the run game, the O-line was one of the biggest problems last year. It didn't come to fruition. They've made these investments: Olu Fashanu, Armand Membou, Elijah Vera Tucker, Joe Tippmann, all these guys they've invested recent picks in, but they need this group to actually perform. Aaron Rodgers was under siege last year, and they weren't able to run the ball. I watched enough Jets games studying Aaron Rodgers to get ready for this year to be like, that offensive line's rough. They need this group to come through quickly. And I think that's that's the problem here that they're running into, is that if they don't come up, Justin Fields will be exciting. I covered him in Pittsburgh. He'll be exciting to have his athleticism. He'll take advantage of those holes. If they can get a good O-line, and even a very good O-line is what I think they need, then you can have Justin Fields and Breece Hall running that option game. That can be the primary part of your offense. You still have Garrett Wilson as your primary receiver. Then you can work around that. But you got to be able to run that football. This offensive line has to take a step forward. If it doesn't, it's going to be another long season in New York.
Maybe the 3 worst were the Jets, Jaguars, and Patriots. They have done all of them. When you look at the switch they have made of head coach, they've added personnel at that unit, but all of those coaches speak on, and I know Liam Cohen said it here, people need to see us when we break the huddle and know that we're coming. This goes back to my indictment of Miami. They don't have that. They're trying to run around people and go past people. Their coaches, these new coaches, first start this thing with the mentality. And I think that's a huge part of this entire thing moving forward. The Ravens are a sleeping giant. Y'all might wonder, man, how are they sleeping? They're one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the league. Everybody says that all the time. Well, saying there ain't enough. Y'all still act like everybody forgot about Baltimore. Nobody better to talk about them than the team they got to beat and the guy that covers them, and that's Chris. And we'll do that in just a second on Locked On NFL. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Monarch Money. That is correct. Listen to me, man. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k, properties, or investments. When you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal financial tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. Love that. And you can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Look, I linked all my accounts in Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those alone saved me money every single month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use Locked On NFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half your first year off. That's right, 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code Locked On NFL. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers joining me. Tony Wiggins here of Locked On NFL and Locked On Jaguars here in the barbershop. All right, let's get to the AFC North. I always love to talk AFC North other than talking to Cleveland Browns, which you hit earlier today. I like talking about Cleveland too. It's just that I want to talk about some of the good teams like Baltimore and Pittsburgh, right? Maybe Cincinnati if they get their act together a little bit. But Baltimore, while everyone has Baltimore in their power rankings in the top 3 or 4, I think the rhetoric around Baltimore has been a little bit quiet. And I think there's 2 reasons, Chris. One reason is because, well, we're used to talking about Baltimore being good, and it's obvious. Everybody knows it. The other one is I kind of believe a little bit that people believe, yeah, they won the top 3 in the leagues, but when it all matters, they ain't going to win anyway. They're going to fold a little bit. What do you think?
I think when you look at the Ravens, they are one of the most complete rosters in the NFL. Personally, they're one of my Super Bowl favorites. But the problem is they were my Super Bowl favorite last year.
See?
And they were my Super Bowl favorites the year before that.
See?
It's kind of like, okay, how long can they be up there with the way that they're playing? Now, I still think that they should be that right now because I do think that. But I get why some people might be, taking a step back and saying like, maybe they don't have it because Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, blah, 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 all that stuff. But I still look at this team. I see Lamar Jackson paired with Derrick Henry in the backfield. That's still the best running back quarterback combination that can scare you with both of them being able to run in the NFL. DeAndre Hopkins is added to there. Zay Flowers is still growing. This offensive line, I think, is still going to be really good with Tyler Lindenbaum. They've added Rosengarten. I think that they've got a lot going for them. And this defense just looks like it has to be good. Travis Jones, Madubuike is really good. Roquan Smith, I'd say, is the second best linebacker in the NFL. You still got Marlon Humphrey at safety. They've added Jaire Alexander. I'm not sure how much that's going to help them, but I think that when you have Humphrey and Hamilton, and I really, really liked Malachi Starks coming out of Georgia, along with a second-year Nate Wiggins. You got a lot of potential all around this team, but you need to stay healthy and you need to be able to win in the postseason. They lost the division round last year, the conference round the year before that. And I mean, if Zay Flowers don't fumble at the goal line, are we talking like this? Because they probably beat the Chiefs in 2023. But again, it's the if and buts was candy nuts, then every day will be Christmas. So you got to be able to deliver. I think people are holding back on that. And part of it may be just they're not the sexy pick anymore. They're not the, I'm giving you a hot take. It's like, oh, you picked the Ravens. Good job. Everyone's been picking the Ravens for some years. So they don't have the element of surprise, but I still think people should take them very seriously as a threat.
One thing that they've always had and the Steelers have always had is good defense. The one thing Baltimore absolutely missed last year was a lights-out pass rusher, somebody you really knew was coming around that corner that they haven't had since maybe the likes of T. Sizzle, right? Guess what? Because of the draft process and because of concerns about character, somebody fell to him, man. And it's my boy Mike Green from Marshall. Listen to this.
Mike Green's going to be a good football player. I mean, I don't need to see any preseason action to know it. We've seen him on display in training camp. All the skill sets that you require to be a dominant pass rusher, he has it. You mentioned it. His tool belt, his wheelhouse of moves are superb, especially for a rookie. So those are the things you want to see from a pass rusher. He has it. He's going to be great. It's only a matter of how great is he going to be coming out his rookie season.
Listen to me. I went to the Senior Bowl, and there were 2 guys. I was with my boy James Coleman, who covers media and played at Florida State a lot, played a little bit in the NFL too. He says, "Who are you looking at, Wig?" I said, "Shamar Stewart, because my buddy coached him at Texas A&M, and Mike Green." On day 1, both of those guys had dudes' jaws dropping. Mike Green pancaked somebody. Whoever it was got drafted too. I can't remember who it was. I think this dude is going to be so good, it's not even funny, Chris.
Listen, when Mike Green was falling down the draft boards, I was like, "Uh-oh, that's."
And y'all didn't have a second round pick either in Pittsburgh.
But the Steelers, they're loaded with edge.
Yeah, they didn't need it, right?
Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, and I think Jack Sawyer is a good 4th round pick at that position. But Mike Green, I was like I thought that dude should have gone top 15. And so when you get him falling down that way, I'm like, man, the Ravens really scored with that one. As long as he stays out of trouble, I think that dude's going to be a problem. The Ravens, they got pieces, man. They got pieces all around, and John Harbaugh is a very good coach. And I think that he's going to be a guy that is able to get guys, to rally around the situation. So, if I'm anybody else looking at this team, I'm like, we got to pay a lot of attention to these guys because they got a lot of talent. They got young guys to be excited about. They have the quarterback that's really up there. They have a dangerous running back. I think the biggest thing that they have not been able to do is give Lamar Jackson a superstar receiver. And I think D-Hop, of course, used to be that. He's on the back end of his career, maybe not that as much. They're hoping Zay Flowers can turn into that. I think if you ever gave Lamar Jackson a Tyreek Hill level receiver, like, a top 5 guy in the NFL, this team would probably be unstoppable because that's the one thing he has not had in his career.
That guys like Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow have had, and those are the contemporaries that he's often compared to. But I ain't going to give Tyreek Hill to Baltimore. I'm going to sit here and tell you, I want to give him to the Pittsburgh Steelers. What would it take to get Kyle Kraft said a second round pick in 2026. I don't know if they can pay both DK Metcalf and Tyreek Hill. If they get him, they got to get him a contract extension. Is all of this possible considering Aaron Rodgers ain't making a whole bunch of money and the Steelers will probably go with a dude on a rookie contract next year? You let me know, Chris. Can that happen?
I have a hard time seeing Tyreek Hill. One, the contract situation looks really rough. I mean, the Dolphins got a lot of money on him moving forward. Money that, like, if they got rid of him right now, it would hurt their cap by a lot before it would help them. I think next year that would be a case. But I look at the Steelers. Do you want to have that cap on your hands right now? I also don't think the Steelers are. But even before that, the biggest thing that I think that does not happen for the Steelers aren't giving up a second round pick in 2026 unless they are keeping those picks. If you look at all the moves, the Steelers flipped so many things around this year. And you know what they never did in flipping those things around? They never lost a 2026 draft pick for those upper rounds because they're fully invested in this is going to be the year that they go and get their quarterback. They really like the crop of guys that are coming out this year, that they think those guys have the talent. I think that's what the Steelers are sitting on right now. If I'm the Steelers, it may be a 2027 second, or something like that, or a 2027 third, or maybe a player that you want with a 2027 day 3 pick, but nah, not a 2026 day 2 pick. Those picks are prime right now for setting up for the quarterback trade up.
Yep. And I got a feeling based on conversations that Chris and I have had that a whole bunch of Steelers fans will be watching a whole bunch of South Carolina Gamecock football games this year because y'all already going to get the Penn State game. So you might as well watch South Carolina Gamecocks games this year. And that means that Lenore Sellers will be on full display. Okay, if it's not Tyreek, I'm just going to assume that if Pittsburgh decides they need one more wide receiver, there's a dude that was rumored to be retiring, but he's not retiring. Odell Beckham says teams are interested. Do you think the Steelers are one of those teams, sir?
I just don't know if Odell's what you're looking for at this stage of his career. He's been hurt a lot. They're looking for a guy. If the Steelers go get a guy, it's going to be a guy that can play like the wide receiver 2 role. And that's why I think Amari Cooper as a free agent makes the most sense. Just sign the guy. He plugs and plays. You pay him a little bit of money for a year. He's gone the next year. You haven't lost a draft pick. I don't think they're going to get Terry McLaurin because I don't think Terry McLaurin's going anywhere. I think he's going to end up re-signing with the Commanders anyways. I think the bottom line is the Steelers, they could use a wide receiver too, but that was the topic for Thursday's episode of Locked On Steelers was, do they really need to go out and get one because Roman Wilson's playing well in camp? They have 3 tight ends that all operate as dangerous pass catchers right now, and they're going to use all 3 of them a lot this year. So if you go and get a wide receiver too, how often are you using those 3 tight ends? How often are you using Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin when he comes back healthy? I think that the Steelers are less pressed to go get a wide receiver right now. If there's an opportunity that really works for them, they'll do that. But if there's not, I think they'll just be like, you know what? We got our guys. We're going to go play some football.
And I was a little under the weather, so I did not go to the game. Pittsburgh actually came to Jacksonville, and I tell you, Darnell Washington looks like he's turned the corner. He looks a lot more comfortable as a pass catcher. Caught a touchdown right down the seam against the Jaguars' #1 defense. So we'll keep an eye on that. I want y'all to make sure y'all keep an eye also on Locked On Fantasy Football. We thank you for making this show your first listen today. NFL Draft season is here, so for your second listen, go find the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast with hosts Vinny Iyer and Michelle Majuk. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager you can. Take that trophy home if you do that this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure you tap in the morning with Tyler Rowland and Madman here on Locked On NFL for the latest on the Steelers. Please tap in with Chris over on Locked On Steelers. He does an outstanding job. And I ain't just saying that because he's sitting there looking at me. I'm telling you that because it's cold truth. That's my brother from another mother. And we're about to get out of here and go cover some football so we can make sure we bring you guys the kind of coverage that you need. But first, we want to thank you for spending your 30 minutes with us every day. We know that your time is valuable, and we appreciate you for taking that time to spend it with us here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For Tony Wiggins, Chris Carter, we'll see you later.